Hey, what's up? This is Toby, and you're watching Shoot the Messenger. Today we're going to talk about the SpaceX explosion that happened. Was it yesterday? Or was it
Yesterday.
Yesterday. John's going to explain a little bit about that because I saw it was trending today and have no idea what happened. So can you explain a little bit what's going on with the whole SpaceX explosion?
Well, SpaceX goes with a philosophy of rather than spend 5 or 10 years to get a rocket perfect and then have it blow up, they'll launch rocket after rocket, and then they'll study what goes wrong after it blows up, and then re-perfect it. Their way they do things, they've actually surpassed NASA quite a bit. But the Starship went up yesterday, which is a huge piece of machinery, and it blew up again. So I'm a big SpaceX fan. Unfortunately, it didn't get to orbit. I think it fragged out at 20 or 30,000 feet. Didn't get up very high.
That's just part of the, part of the building process for Tesla.
But
sure.
Well, SpaceX and Tesla are two separate
Oh, I
companies.
mean, that's my bad.
But
SpaceX,
SpaceX, what concerns me is that when they have something like that happen, debris falls down. I mean, are you always sure you know where the debris is going to go? I mean, an explosion, or, and a rocket, and strong kinetic energy. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I never really thought about what else it falls. I mean, I used to watch back in the day when those capsules would release from up in space, and then I would always think that as a kid, like, not going to land on somebody's head, because I was always like, those things just fall out of the sky like a little parachute, and they just randomly drop to the ground, and they're like humongous, like capsules falling from space. I can just picture that squishing me playing soccer or something.
It seems to me that SpaceX is definitely going to be launching a Mars mission, I would say probably in the next 5 years or 4 years, somewhere in there. The Starship program that SpaceX is doing is crucial for the Mars mission. But at the same point in time, Tesla and the Russians are working on a thing called the ion drive. And the ion drive can be used for commercial planes. Uses a fraction of the energy that normal rocket fuel. It can be used to bring payloads up to space. And then once they get into space, it switches over to another propulsion system from there, and then goes out a little further, and then it kicks on a different type of ion drive. And then you can, the Russians are talking about that they figured a way to get to Mars instead of taking 6 or 7 or 8 months, 45 days, which makes it viable to get there now.
Yeah.
So
the astronaut thing that I was just reading about how they've been stuck up there for like 8 months or whatever.
Oh, don't even get me started.
I don't know anything about that at all.
Okay, here's the story, folks. Right, once upon a time, there was this really big company that used to like shake the earth with all kinds of innovations. Its name was Boeing, right? And then all of a sudden, they got to a point where they're trying to make things, quicker and faster and cheaper, and it didn't turn out too good for them. There was 2 contracts awarded, if memory serves me correct, one to Boeing and then one to SpaceX. Boeing has performed miserably with the government contract to augment NASA for manned missions to the space station, that kind of thing. They made their first rocket capsule that's not even anywhere as sophisticated as SpaceX. It gets to the space station, and then they find out that it's not safe for the astronauts to come back because of the heat shield tiles had broken loose. Anybody is familiar with the Columbia? I do believe it was Columbia. When Columbia re-entered the atmosphere, there was heat shields that were broken off of Columbia, and that's why Columbia disintegrated when it was coming back to Earth from space. So it was deemed not safe for the astronauts. The astronauts have been in space now. They're supposed to be there for 8 days at the space station. They've been there for 8 months. Wow. So, yes, they're making the best of it. Yes, they're were trained for missions like that, but at the same point in time, SpaceX. Everybody goes, well, yeah, Elon Musk rockets blow up all the time. Well, what they do versus what Boeing's doing, Boeing spends a ton of time making it perfect, and with every contingency, and then SpaceX just puts the rocket together, launches it. I guess they have a ton of sensors on board, and then something goes wrong, then they know what goes wrong, and then they go to that problem and fix that problem and critique it. Well, it worked pretty good. I mean, SpaceX has been launching like lots of satellites. Starlink is a success. Usually anything Elon Musk touches turns to like, gold or palladium or whatever expensive metal is on the planet. But I don't know. It's Starship's starting to kind of concern me because this is, I think, the fourth one. Every one of them's had a problem, but this one didn't even get in, like, even up into orbit.
So, like food wise, like just survival. Like when they go up there, I'm assuming they're not planning on staying up there for 8 months. So, like,
Yeah.
are you bringing 8 months
Yes.
worth of food? You know.
One of the things that's been tossed around is that you'll have, and this is probably the way they'll do it. Here will be the Starship. It looks like a torpedo up in the front, and you'll have a cylindrical wheel that turns to provide artificial gravity, and they'll probably have food that they can grow, and they're going to definitely be bringing seeds and food to grow with them on the first trip going to Mars. Before the first trip goes to Mars, my prediction is that SpaceX will launch unmanned capsules that will go to Mars, and then they'll have automated systems, robots, automated systems, put them together like a big, huge habit trail, because they're just not going to send one rocket and a group of people, and they'll have a contingency craft there as well, and they'll probably have a contingency craft midpoint. In case there's a problem, they can transfer to the contingency spacecraft, like a lifeboat, and then just go back to Earth. So there's a lot of prep before this happens. If the ion drive happens and it's a 45-day trip, it's going to be way quicker than anybody imagines. And the Russians are ahead of the game right now.
So when Elon offered to go pick them up, right, and then Biden said no, why would Biden not want them to go get them if they're stuck up there? I mean, was it dangerous? Is that the?
I don't know. I mean, as a recovered Democrat, and I'm an independent, everybody, yeah, I know, hiss and boo. I don't think he was that great of a president. I think he was very leader-like. And why would Biden, I don't know, Biden like to spend money on all kinds of junk. I mean, why not just have a rescue mission to go pull them, bring them back? It could have been a huge PR thing for Biden, right?
I mean, if we can trade for Brittany Griner in Russia, can't we just go and get somebody that's stuck in space?
There's regular supply missions that go to the space station for food and to bring up experiments and bring things back and forth. I forget the intervals. I think it's every 2 or 3 months. Why not just one of those supply missions, just bring them back? You know, set a bigger capsule up there instead of, resupplying them with people. Rotate these people out. So what they did, is, when I understand it, is they left them there to rotate instead of the new crew members coming up. They became the new crew members, and they're doing a rotation.
Oh.
So the woman that's up there looks like she's aged, like it's stressful on her. Wow. She doesn't look good. Yeah. So.
Wow. I mean, if they're rotating like that, I don't know, that's all pretty weird to me. It's like you figure they would have just went and got them, brought them back.
They're lucky they're alive.
Rather than rotating people. Right? Like you figure they would just bring them home.
I don't know. I mean, you think about it. I mean, Boeing launches their first manned rocket. And we were launching manned rockets to orbit the Earth with 2 people. I think that was the Gemini missions. People out there maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe Mercury was a two-man capsule. I mean, we're talking technology from the 1960s, and Boeing can't even get that right.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, Boeing.
Something's really wrong. Boeing's their whole approach to the 737-900, and then what they rumor has that they off the whistleblower.
Yeah. That's what I
Yeah,
was
that's
gonna say,
nice.
and really all the whistleblower said was they cut corners. They cut corners, and they
That's what
don't.
everybody says about Boeing.
Yeah, and they don't do things the right way. And that's if you don't do things the right way when you're dealing with people flying, thousands of people around the country, you should probably make sure all your
Yeah,
I's are
but you have
dotted
to
and T's
remember
are
a
crossed.
CEO's got to have stock taken into consideration for stock valuation. Um, and I think at that point in time, I have a terminology I've come up with called advanced capitalism. I think that capitalism is, like making business, making money. But advanced capitalism is you're making so much money that like actually making a car or a plane, the lawsuits from the wrongful deaths are cheaper than fixing it, and you choose to go with the deaths, you should be prosecuted and imprisoned for that. That's inhumane.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and there was, I think, a major car manufacturer, I'm not going to name, that had a car that was rear-ended and the thing would explode, and they chose not to do anything with it. I'm not going to name names, but you can look that up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
think a
you
lot
can
of
look it
people
up.
might have an idea about that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would rear end them, and they would just the gas tanks were just right at the right height, right angle, and they
Those
would just
cars were some
explode.
beauties, weren't they?
Oh yeah, they're just gorgeous cars,
Beautiful cars. Yeah.
gorgeous.
So, onto the Zelensky stuff. I feel like that's been a big topic of discussion. Like Cassidy said, she's seen the SNL skit about it, but we watched the actual meeting. You watched it live. You came into work. You told me I seen it. I said no. I watched it, and even with the other guy that was in the room with us, everyone seems to have their own opinion on this little meeting. And I feel like if you don't know the backstory, if you don't know, a lot of the stuff that has gone on between Ukraine, Russia, United States, then of course it's going to come across as us kind of bullying somebody. But if you know some of the backstory, and you know our relationship with Zelensky and the whole Biden collusion and all that stuff, when you know about that stuff, it kind of changes the dynamic of it, because you can either look at it from like face value and go, oh wow, what a bunch of bullies just picking on this guy, or you can go, well, there's kind of more to the story, and so you kind of have to know what this is really about. So surface level, it really kind of rubbed people wrong. Not everybody, but a lot of people. And then, but I feel like you should know what you're talking about before you start,
Optics are your perception at the time you see it. But the things that we didn't get to see are the behind the closed door meetings with the vice president, Zelensky, Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio met with Zelensky, and Zelensky insisted in coming to Washington, D.C. Because he wanted to put on a big parade, in my opinion, with the Democrats to see if he could get them, to. He doesn't want to give up any mineral rights. Come on. This guy doesn't want to do that. And what Zelensky wants is more money and more money and more money to fight a war that is unwinnable. Now, I'm going to just say it straight up. The Ukrainian people have fought like brave, they're valiant. But the thing is that Russians, it's turned into trench warfare. Anybody that's studied world history understands that trench warfare, what I'm talking about, is one day you have 15 miles you gain, then you lose 20. Then the next day you gain 7. Then the next day you gain 8. Then you lose 5. And goes the front line moves back and forth constantly all the time. Excuse me. During the First World War, trench warfare came to a no-win scenario. Okay, there was another famous war in world history when we were fighting the North Koreans, And that's why there's a DMZ, a demilitarized zone between North Korea and South Korea. Technically, that war never ended because without using nuclear weapons, that's I do believe Truman. I think it was Truman or was Eisenhower at that time refused to go with that option, and I do believe that the general at that time who suggested it was dismissed and sidelined for. He said the only way to stop it was to drop a nuke right between the two countries, and they opted with a ceasefire, a DMZ zone. So what I'm getting at is between South Korea and North Korea, that war technically is still in play. We're just not shooting at each other. We're backing the South Koreans, and the South Koreans and our forces are not shooting the North Koreans, and the North Koreans are not shooting us, but yet there are still like super bad tensions. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine all boils down to two things. Wars are started for money and because of religion. This one is all about money. And also the fact that Putin felt threatened, that Ukraine was flirting with NATO and was going to join NATO, and was just livid that they were a former Soviet country that he considered part of Russia, in his mind, is going to join NATO. And if we had good leadership at that time, we would have negotiated a peace before there was a war. While they were massing on the border, or even before they were massing on the border, the U.S., France, and all different envoys should have got together with Putin and cut some kind of deal with Zelensky, because the Ukraine-Russia war is a no-win war. It's like the First World War. It's like the South and North Korean War. It's trench warfare. The front line moves, a little bit per day. There's not going to be any long-term solution to the war with Russia for the Ukrainians. They've got what territory they've got. Some kind of a deal needs to be struck, and we need to just put a stop to this. People are dying, and the Ukrainians are not going to win against Russia. We could supply them with $1 trillion. All right, all it's going to do is, the more we're supplying the Ukrainians with money, now listen to me, everybody, at some point Putin's going to say, you know what, I'm losing too many assets. I have a nuclear option. Why not just go ahead and flex my nuclear muscle and just drop one bright boy? That's a code term, folks. One nuclear weapon, and just shock the world, and see if I can leverage a stop to this with that. I agree with Trump. The thing needs to stop, because you have to remember, Trump's on the phone with this guy and listening to his tone of voice, even though he's talking in a different language. And yeah, Putin does know English, but he doesn't like speaking English because his English is real broken. He finds it embarrassing to talk in English, so he uses a translator most of the time, but he does speak English to a point. Putin is going to get to a point. He's so frustrated that, and we're fighting a war by proxy. By giving the Ukrainians weapons and money and antagonizing the Russians even more, and playing with fire with this whole thing, which we are, at some point in time, other countries are going to start backing up the Russians. Now, the North Koreans sent 10,000 North Korean troops to Russia, and from what I've heard, read in the media, all of them were slaughtered in the battle, all 10,000. They don't exist anymore. There's a Scheiston, I'll say it in German, of people in Asia. How many more people can they send to the front? So money, is not the issue here. This is logistically an unwinnable situation. My opinion, the reason why Putin, besides the NATO thing, He wanted a pipeline going to the sea that went through Crimea, and that's why he does not want Western culture or NATO like buy anything that's of interest to Russia. The Russians consider NATO a huge threat. An attack against one is an attack against all. And this war just needs to end because it's unwinnable. Just like the North Korea, South Korea war. Vietnam was an unwinnable war for us. Yeah, a lot of people, how much damage did that do to American soldiers?
Yeah, exactly.
Men and women.
Oh, they say we lost that war.
It was
That's what they say. They say we went into unknown territory and we're way out of our league.
It was unwinnable. Anytime you're dealing with a war where you have problems with logistics with terrain, or you have problems with I call guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is you can't tell who the enemy is because they're in plain clothes. And next, some 14-year-old kid comes up and shoots you in the back of the head, and he's on the other side. My dad was in the Greek resistance. My dad said during the daytime, he goes, they were walking around public markets. There'd be German soldiers, walking around. He said at night, he goes, we were killing them.
Yeah. I think my big thing with the Ukraine-Russia thing is, in my opinion, I feel like we went to the wrong side. Like, we're talking to the wrong people. Like, Zelensky's not who we should be negotiating with to stop this war. It's Putin. We need to go talk to Putin. Putin is the issue. So we need to talk to Putin and say, hey, leave them alone. That's the only way we're going to get it to stop. I don't feel like talking to the weaker of the two is really doing anything. And that's why when they were interviewing all of the Ukrainian people, they were all saying, well, it's obvious whose back the United States has. It's obvious who, you know what I mean? Like, it's obvious who they don't like. And that's what they got from that meeting. So when they were interviewing the people on the streets of Ukraine after that little Oval Office meeting, they were like, cool, America hates us. So that's all it did for the Ukrainian people, was make them think that we do not have their back whatsoever in any kind of way. And I feel like Biden really started a lot of that. We have this grudge towards Biden and Zelensky because of all the collusion and money stolen from our country, and now we're trying to figure all that out. But I feel like, would you agree, to solve this, we need to go to Putin. Putin is the one that's not going to back off. He's the one.
He is not going to back off
Ever, And
anybody, I'm kind of a history buff, and this is the persona, this is the man you're dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. When the Berlin Wall fell, okay, this is a historical fact, and you saw those images, people with picks, and they're knocking down the Berlin Wall and they're trashing it, right? Mm-hmm. There is a border guard by the name of Vladimir Putin, and he came out by himself to a crowd of a couple thousand people, or hundreds and hundreds, or whatever, right, of angry people who wanted to chip down the wall, and he convinced them not to damage his portion because they would get in a lot of trouble, and somehow he convinced them, and his portion of the wall was the only portion that wasn't attacked. Wow. And tore down. So that's the kind of guy you're dealing with. What kind of man, and he's also former KGB, right? Mm-hmm. And what's it now? KGB turned to FSB or something like that, or yeah, KGB doesn't exist anymore. They just give it a new name. I mean, this guy is willing to lay it on the line for his country. What kind of man walks out to a mob who hates, right, Russians, who hates communism, and are angry and they're tired of being oppressed, and talks him out of tearing down his section of what his responsibility was, and he upheld his duty, and somehow he negotiated with them and talked to them and convinced them they get in massive trouble if they tore down his section, and they left it alone. Yeah. So that takes a lot of kahunas.
I feel like Trump's not scared of anybody except for Putin. I really do. That's my issue.
Yeah, but
I feel like it's the only person he fears, and I don't know why, but I feel like he's afraid of him.
I think that you look at it this way. Uh, it's kind of like the bad kid at the party, at the high school party, has got a reputation as being a regulator, like somebody who doesn't take any disrespect from anybody, right? Putin doesn't like to talk about, doesn't make this well known, but he is probably the richest man on the planet. He hides his wealth. You know, how well did it work out for that general? It was, going up to Moscow to go overthrow the government. Yeah, he died in a plane crash mysteriously. Yeah, the plane just happened to crash. So if you mess with Vladimir Putin, right, and you thwart his efforts, he doesn't play any games at all. I mean, he doesn't play any games at all. And whether you like the man or you don't like the man, it doesn't make any difference. He is in control of one of the strongest nations on the planet. He is engaged in a war, right? And he has no intentions of stopping.
I think
None.
Because of the Soviet Union, USSR stuff, I don't think they'll ever like us. I don't think Russia will ever like the United States.
Well, the thing
because
is,
of
we
that.
kind of, I mean, it goes back to the Second World War. Patton, one of my idols, right? He told Truman, Roosevelt passed away, and Truman was in power. He told Truman, he said, I could be in Moscow, he goes, and have those commie, such and suches eliminated. And I think he gave a time frame of like 5 weeks or 6 weeks. He said, don't stop me here. He goes, we'll just mow right through. And he goes, and we'll take Russia too, and take him out. A lot of people don't realize, but Russia was actually aligned with Nazi Germany, right? And the Germans turned on them and then went after them.